Welcome to Art Historian. Today we are going to be talking about Artemisia Gentileschi, who is our very first female artist. And you may be wondering, out of the now 7 artists we have talked about, why are we just now getting to a woman? But you may have guessed that the art world was very male-centric at this time. And so for that reason, there were not a lot of female artists that made it into big popularity. So their works have been lost or miscredited or any number of things that can happen to a woman's work in a man's world. As I've mentioned in previous videos, unlike today, where you say you want to be an artist and your grandmother asks you if you also want to starve, the art world in the Baroque era was a very prestigious world that often excluded women because women were not taken seriously. Then you have Artemisia Gentileschi, who was born in 1593 to an artist, a male artist, named Orazio Gentileschi. Please forgive me if I'm pronouncing these names wrong. Orazio Gentileschi was very good friends with our man Caravaggio, who, if you need a refresher on, there will be a link in one of these corners. However, for that reason, Artemisia Gentileschi picked up a lot of talent, if you want to call it that, skill, what have you, from her father. Today we're going to be talking about her first signed painting ever, which was... There's a dog. My dog's behind me. Her first signed painting ever, which was Susanna and the Elders. And in signing this piece, she kind of makes her statement to the world that she's arrived. This is her premiere showcase as a real artist. Susanna and the Elders by Gentileschi was an oil painting on canvas made in 1610. Now, if you are unfamiliar with the story of Susanna and the Elders, I'll give you a brief recap. It was a biblical story in which Susanna is a beautiful and pious and married woman in this town. These town elders, who we'll call the wicked elders, conspire to coerce Susanna into having sex with them. And so what they come up with is they go to her and they say if she doesn't have sex with them, they will tell her husband that she has committed adultery against him. And she refuses to have sex with them, so they accuse her. She is tried, maybe put to death, and she calls out to God. The angel David intervenes on her behalf and exposes what really happened. So she is absolved, and instead these wicked elders are put to death. Now, I want to be very clear and say that I consider Artemisia Gentileschi's depiction of Susanna and the Elders to be a masterpiece. And this is a story that was depicted certainly before. It's been depicted many times in the history of art. However, there are a couple key differences to the way Gentileschi shows Susanna in particular, compared to the way other artists had shown her up to this point. So in order to highlight these differences, we are going to pick on an artist called Tintoretto, who also had a painting of Susanna and the Elders. And so here is the Susanna and the Elders by Tintoretto. Here is the depiction of Susanna and the Elders by Artemisia Gentileschi. So these two very different paintings do come from the same story, but they are set at very different times. Now, Tintoretto's shows the scene before anything has happened. So Susanna in this instance, most of the focus is on her. She's in the foreground. She takes up more of the painting. Her space takes up quite a bit of the painting. And these elders are kind of on the other side of this wall. They haven't seen anything yet. However, in the case of Susanna, in this particular painting, something that might not translate as well to today's viewers are these hints that Tintoretto has put in Susanna's space in order to make her seem less sympathetic. He wasn't really interested in painting her as a victim at all, and we can see that by her body type. The things that are around her, a lot of these fine things, jewelry, what have you, and the mirror. And all of these things would have symbolized different vices like gluttony, material items, greed, and vanity. So, he is highlighting the flaws of the Susanna that he has portrayed in this. Whereas he is not highlighting at all the gruesome act that these gross men are about to commit. Now, there are a lot of great things about this painting, but because we're picking on Tintoretto, we are going to ignore those and move on to the contrast between Gentileschi's Susanna. Gentileschi's depiction obviously takes place at a very different moment in the story, when the act of trying to coerce her, and in this one it's more violent. It's a very visceral depiction of what went on here, right in the middle of what these men are trying to force Susanna to do. And, we can see that Susanna is uncomfortable. We can see by this kind of way that she's arched back really awkwardly. She's pushing them away. She's had something that was covering her, but it's fallen off. They are imposing on her personally. It's a much more visceral depiction of this story. So today we hear a lot about representation matters and why representation matters, and this is a good example of why representation mattered even in the Baroque era, and especially in the Baroque era when women's voices were not being heard in the way of art pieces. Tintoretto's version, at best, he was negligent to relay some of this story. At worst, it was intentional that he didn't show Susanna as a victim. Whereas in Gentileschi's Susanna and the Elders, Susanna is very much a victim. It's very clear that her space is being invaded, and it was on the fault of these men and not on the fault of Susanna whatsoever. Now, only a year after this painting was created, Gentileschi experienced her own rape and subsequent trial. The attacker was her father's apprentice at the time, who was known as Agostino Tassi, and though he was found guilty, his punishment of exile was never enforced. So this kind of public trial and the context of what the trial was based on painted Gentileschi as an outsider from a very young age. She would have been seen differently by the community, unfortunately, after this event has come to light, which it is part of the reason that she was able to make such a big name for herself in the art world. Her paintings were seen as kind of an oddity, and for that reason, she was able to exploit the terrible thing that happened to her in order to benefit her own career. She did end up eventually marrying as well, but people were very curious about her paintings, which led to her popularity and eventual fame. Now, there is definitely more to come on Artemisia Gentileschi, but I suspect that I have thrown a lot of information at you today. There's my dog again. But next time we will be talking about one of Artemisia's later works, and we will actually be comparing it with a Caravaggio painting of the same subject. Until then, thank you for watching. See you next time.